Before we begin, I want to warn you that this story contains sensitive content, including themes of infidelity and emotional betrayal. This is a true story, but to protect the privacy of those involved, all names have been changed. If you're ready, let's dive into a tale that will leave you questioning how well you truly know the person you love. Hi, I'm William Ham. This is my story, a story I never thought I'd have to tell. It's about love, trust, and the moment I realized the life I thought I had was built on lies. My wife, Ophelia Hill, was my everything. We met 10 years ago at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. She was this radiant, confident woman who could light up a room with her smile. I was drawn to her instantly. We dated for 2 years, got married, and built what I thought was a perfect life together. We had a beautiful home, 2 amazing kids, and what seemed like an unshakable bond. But sometimes, the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. This story starts on what seemed like an ordinary day. I was on a work trip in Chicago, closing a deal for my company, but something felt off. I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling in my gut. I told myself it was just stress or maybe the flu, but deep down, I think I knew something was wrong. I decided to cut the trip short and fly home early. I didn't tell Ophelia. I thought it would be a nice surprise, a chance to spend an extra day together, just the 2 of us. Little did I know, that decision would change my life forever. When I landed, I grabbed my bags and headed straight home. The house was quiet when I walked in, which wasn't unusual. Ophelia often spent her afternoons at the gym or running errands. I dropped my suitcase by the door and called out her name. No answer. I walked upstairs, still thinking about how happy she'd be to see me. But as I reached the bedroom door, I heard something, a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a laugh, but not Ophelia's. It was deeper, unfamiliar. I pushed the door open, and what I saw next is something I'll never forget. There she was, my wife, my Ophelia, in our bed with another man. And not just any man. It was Robert Delgado, the guy she'd been calling her gym buddy for months. Time seemed to stop. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. Ophelia's eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw pure panic. Robert, well, he didn't even look at me. He just grabbed his clothes and bolted, leaving me standing there in shock. Ophelia tried to speak, but no words came out. And then, when she finally found her voice, the first thing she said wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an explanation. She looked at me and said, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming home early?" Can you believe that? After everything, she tried to blame me. That moment shattered everything I thought I knew about our marriage. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the way she tried to twist it, to make it seem like it was my fault. Like I was the one who had done something wrong. But let me back up a bit. This story isn't just about that one moment. It's about the lies that led up to it, the signs I missed, and the painful truth I had to face. It's about how someone you love can become a stranger overnight. So if you're ready, let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about how Ophelia and I met, how our relationship grew, and how Robert Delgado, the man I thought was just her gym buddy, became the center of a secret that would destroy everything. This is my story. This is our story. And by the end of it, I hope you'll understand why I'm sharing it with you, because sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we need to hear the most. It all started 10 years ago, in a little coffee shop on the corner of 5th and Pine. I was waiting in line for my usual latte when I saw her. Ophelia Hill. She was standing by the window, her dark hair catching the sunlight, and I knew right then and there that I had to talk to her. That day I met Ophelia at the coffee shop changed everything. I introduced myself to Ophelia, and to my surprise, she smiled and started chatting with me like we'd known each other for years. There was something about her energy, her confidence, that drew me in. We exchanged numbers, and within weeks, we were inseparable. Ophelia was unlike anyone I'd ever met. She was passionate, ambitious, and had this incredible ability to make everyone around her feel special. I remember our first date like it was yesterday. We went to this little Italian restaurant downtown. She ordered lasagna, and I got the spaghetti carbonara. We talked for hours, laughing so hard that the waiter had to come over twice to ask if we were ready to order dessert. Over the next 2 years, we built a life together. We traveled, explored new hobbies, and supported each other through the ups and downs of life. When I proposed to her on a beach in Hawaii, she said yes without hesitation. Our wedding day was perfect, a sunny afternoon surrounded by friends and family. I truly believed we were unstoppable. After we got married, things only got better. We bought a house in the suburbs, had 2 beautiful kids, Sophia and Liam, and settled into a routine that felt like a dream. Ophelia was an amazing mother, and I was so proud of the life we'd built together. But looking back now, I realized there were signs, little things that seemed off, but were easy to ignore at the time. Hindsight is a cruel thing, isn't it? It makes you question everything you thought you knew. It started small. Ophelia began spending more time at the gym. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd always been into fitness, and I admired her dedication. But then, her routine changed. She started going late at night, saying it was the only time she could fit it into her schedule. There were other things too. She became more secretive with her phone. I'd walk into the room, and she'd quickly close her messages or turn the screen away. When I asked her about it, she'd laugh it off and say, "Oh, it's just work stuff." And then there were the little lies. She'd tell me she was meeting a friend for coffee, but when I asked how it went, she'd give vague answers or change the subject. At the time, I told myself I was overthinking it. Ophelia was my wife, the mother of my children. I trusted her completely. But now I can't help but wonder, was I just blind to the truth? The first time I met Robert Delgado, I didn't think much of him. Ophelia introduced him as her gym buddy. She said they'd started working out together a few months ago and that he was helping her with her fitness goals. Robert was tall, muscular, and had this easygoing charm that made him likable. He shook my hand and said, "You've got an amazing wife, man. She's killing it at the gym." I remember feeling proud of Ophelia in that moment. Over the next few months, Robert became a regular part of our lives, or at least Ophelia's life. She'd mention him casually in conversation. "Robert says I should try this new protein shake," or "Robert thinks I'm ready to lift heavier weights." I didn't see him as a threat. Why would I? Ophelia and I had been together for years. We had a family, a home, a life. Robert was just her gym buddy, a friend who shared her passion for fitness. But now, I can't help but wonder, when did their relationship cross the line? Was it a slow build, or did it happen all at once? And why didn't I see it coming? There's one moment that haunts me. It was a few weeks before I found out the truth. Ophelia and I were sitting on the couch watching a movie when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled, and quickly typed something back. I asked, "Who's that?" She didn't even look up. "Just Robert," she said. "He's sending me some workout tips." At the time, I didn't think twice about it. But now, I can't stop replaying that moment in my head. Was that really all it was? Or was there something more going on? Something I was too blind to see? The truth is, I'll never know for sure. But what I do know is this: the life I thought I had was built on lies, and the person I trusted most was hiding a secret that would change everything. Which brings me to the work trip. The trip that changed everything. I was supposed to be in Chicago for 3 days, closing a deal for my company, but something felt off from the moment I left. I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling in my gut. I told myself it was just stress or maybe the flu. But deep down, I think I knew something was wrong. Little did I know, my decision to come home early would lead to a discovery that would shatter my world. The work trip to Chicago was supposed to be routine. I'd done this 100 times before. Fly out, meet with clients, close the deal, and come home. But this time, something felt different. From the moment I stepped off the plane, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. At first, I thought it was just stress. The deal I was working on was a big one, and the pressure was intense. But as the days went on, the feeling only got worse. By the second day, I was physically drained. I woke up with a pounding headache and a fever that wouldn't go away. I tried to push through it, telling myself I just needed to tough it out for one more day. But by that evening, I knew I couldn't do it. I called my boss and explained the situation. He understood and told me to head home early. I booked the first flight out the next morning, but I didn't tell Ophelia. I thought it would be a nice surprise, a chance to spend an extra day together, just the two of us. Little did I know that decision would change everything. As I sat in my hotel room that night, I debated whether to call Ophelia and let her know I was coming home early. Part of me wanted to. I missed her, and I knew she'd be worried if I didn't show up when I was supposed to. But another part of me wanted to surprise her. I imagined her face lighting up when I walked through the door, the way she'd throw her arms around me and tell me how much she missed me. It was a silly, romantic thought, but it made me smile. In the end, I decided not to call. I wanted it to be a surprise. Looking back now, I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if I had called? Would things have turned out differently? Or was this moment inevitable, no matter what I did? The flight home was a blur. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, replaying the events of the past few days. I thought about Ophelia, how she'd been acting lately, the little things that had seemed off but were easy to ignore. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was just tired and stressed. But deep down, I couldn't shake this growing sense of unease. As the plane touched down in Seattle, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was excited to see Ophelia, to surprise her and spend the day together. But another part of me felt off, like something wasn't right. I told myself it was just the fever, that I was being paranoid. But as I grabbed my bags and headed for the taxi, that feeling only got stronger. The ride home felt like it took forever. Every red light, every slow driver, it was like the universe was conspiring against me. I kept checking my watch, willing the car to move faster. As we got closer to the house, my excitement started to mix with something else, something darker. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was there, gnawing at the back of my mind. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Ophelia was my wife, the woman I'd built a life with. There was no reason for me to feel this way. But as the taxi pulled up to our house, that feeling only grew stronger. The house looked the same as it always did, quiet, peaceful, like nothing was wrong. But something felt off. I paid the driver, grabbed my bags, and walked up to the front door. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't figure out why. I told myself it was just the fever, that I was overreacting. But as I turned the key and stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The house was too quiet. I called out Ophelia's name, but there was no answer. I walked upstairs, my heart racing with every step, and then I heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold. It was a laugh, but not Ophelia's. It was deeper, unfamiliar. I pushed the bedroom door open, and what I saw next is something I'll never forget. I pushed the bedroom door open, and for a split second, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It was like time had stopped, like I was stuck in some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. There she was, my wife, my Ophelia, in our bed. But she wasn't alone. Robert Delgado, the man she'd called her gym buddy, was there with her. They were tangled together, their faces flushed, their movements frantic. The sheets were a mess, and the room smelled like sweat and something else, something that made my stomach turn. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing but my body unable to move. I wanted to scream, to yell, to do something, but I couldn't. All I could do was stare, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. And then they noticed me. Ophelia's eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw pure panic. Her face went pale, and she froze, like a deer caught in headlights. Robert, well, he didn't even look at me at first. He was too busy scrambling to grab his clothes. It was like watching a scene from a movie, but it was real. This was my life, my marriage, my home. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew came crashing down. Robert didn't say a word. He just grabbed his clothes, his shirt, his pants, whatever he could reach, and bolted. He didn't even bother to put them on properly. He just held them in front of him and ran, pushing past me like I wasn't even there. I heard the front door slam shut, and then there was silence. I turned back to Ophelia, who was still sitting in the bed, clutching the sheets to her chest. Her face was a mix of emotions, shock, fear, guilt. But what hurt the most was the way she looked at me, like I was the one who had done something wrong. For what felt like an eternity, neither of us said a word. The room was so quiet I could hear the sound of my own breathing, ragged and uneven. And then she spoke. The first thing she said wasn't an apology, it wasn't even an explanation. She looked at me, her voice trembling, and said, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming home early?" Can you believe that? After everything, after what I had just walked in on, she tried to blame me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all, but all I could feel was this overwhelming sense of betrayal. I finally found my voice, and when I spoke, it came out as a low, almost guttural growl. Are you serious right now? That's what you're going with? That it's my fault? She didn't answer. She just sat there staring at me like she was waiting for me to say something else. I took a step closer, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me? She still didn't answer. She just looked down at the sheets, her face flushed with shame. I felt like I was going to explode. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to do anything to make her feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. But instead, I just stood there, my whole body trembling with rage and disbelief. And then she finally spoke. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh that didn't sound like my own. "Not what I think? Are you kidding me? I just walked in on you with another man, Ophelia. What the hell am I supposed to think?" She didn't have an answer for that. She just sat there, silent, like she was waiting for me to figure it out on my own. But I didn't need her to explain. I already knew the truth. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't a mistake. This was a betrayal, a calculated, deliberate betrayal that had been going on for who knows how long. And the worst part? She wasn't even sorry. She just sat there, trying to shift the blame onto me, like I was the one who had done something wrong. In that moment, I realized something that shattered me even more than what I had just seen. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved, trusted, built a life with, wasn't real. She was a stranger, someone I didn't even recognize anymore, and that realization hurt more than anything else. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at her, waiting for her to say something, anything that would make this make sense. But she didn't. She just sat there, silent, like she was waiting for me to leave. So I did. I walked out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and into the living room. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make sense of it. All I could think about was the look on her face when she saw me. The panic, the guilt, the way she tried to blame me for something she had done. And as I sat there, alone in the dark, I realized something else. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was the end of everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the person I had built my life with. And that realization hurt more than anything else. I don't know how long I sat there in the living room, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Minutes? Hours? It felt like an eternity. My mind was racing, but my body felt numb, like I was trapped in some kind of surreal nightmare. Eventually, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Ophelia was coming down. I didn't turn to look at her. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the wall, waiting for her to say something, anything, that would make this make sense. But when she finally spoke, it wasn't what I expected. "William," she said, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh that didn't sound like my own. "Talk? You want to talk now? After what I just walked in on?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, her arms crossed like she was waiting for me to calm down. But I wasn't going to calm down. Not this time. I stood up, my whole body trembling with rage. "How long, Ophelia? How long has this been going on?" She looked down at the floor, her face flushed with shame. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not what I think?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I just walked in on you with another man, Ophelia. What the hell am I supposed to think?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, silent, like she was waiting for me to figure it out on my own. But I didn't need her to explain. I already knew the truth. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't a mistake. This was a betrayal, a calculated, deliberate betrayal that had been going on for who knows how long. And the worst part? She wasn't even sorry. She just stood there, trying to shift the blame onto me, like I was the one who had done something wrong. In that moment, I realized something that shattered me even more than what I had just seen. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved, trusted, built a life with, wasn't real. She was a stranger, someone I didn't even recognize anymore. And that realization hurt more than anything else. The conversation that followed was like something out of a bad movie. Ophelia tried to explain, but her words were empty, hollow. She kept saying it wasn't what I thought, that it was just a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. But the more she talked, the angrier I got. "How can you say it didn't mean anything?" I shouted. "You were in our bed, Ophelia." "Our bed? How can you stand there and tell me it didn't mean anything?" She didn't have an answer for that. She just looked down at the floor, her face flushed with shame. And then, she did something that made my blood boil. She tried to blame me. "If you had just told me you were coming home early, this wouldn't have happened," she said, her voice trembling. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all, but all I could feel was this overwhelming sense of betrayal. "Are you serious right now?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You're really going to stand there and tell me this is my fault? That if I had just told you I was coming home early, you wouldn't have been in bed with another man?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, silent, like she was waiting for me to say something else. But I didn't need her to explain. I already knew the truth. This wasn't about me. This wasn't about us. This was about her choices, her actions, her betrayal, and no amount of excuses or blame shifting could change that. As the conversation dragged on, I started to piece together the signs I had missed. The little things that had seemed off, but were easy to ignore at the time. The late nights at the gym, the secretive phone use, the vague answers when I asked where she was going. It all made sense now. I thought about Robert, the man she'd called her gym buddy. How many times had she mentioned him in passing? How many times had I brushed it off, thinking it was nothing? I felt like a fool. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just about what I had missed. It was about what she had done. The lies she had told, the secrets she had kept. She had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and there was no coming back from that. In that moment, I realized something else. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was the end of everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the person I had built my life with. And that realization hurt more than anything else. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. But eventually, I realized something. This wasn't just about Ophelia. This wasn't just about Robert. This was about me, about who I was, who I wanted to be, and what I was willing to accept. And in that moment, I knew I had a choice to make. I could stay, try to work things out, and hope that somehow, someway, we could move past this. Or I could leave, walk away, and start over. But no matter what I chose, one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed were a blur. I felt like I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. The emotions came in waves: betrayal, heartbreak, anger, confusion, each one crashing over me until I felt like I was drowning. Betrayal was the first wave. It hit me the hardest, like a punch to the gut that left me gasping for air. How could she do this to me, to us, to our family? I kept replaying the moment I walked into that bedroom, the look on her face, the way she tried to blame me. It was like a broken record in my mind, one I couldn't turn off. Then came the heartbreak. It was a deep, aching pain that settled in my chest and refused to go away. I thought about all the years we'd spent together, the memories we'd made, the life we'd built. How could something so beautiful turn into something so broken? Anger followed close behind. It was a fiery, all-consuming rage that made me want to scream, to throw things, to do anything to make her feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. But no matter how much I wanted to lash out, I couldn't. Because beneath the anger was something else, something far more painful. Confusion. I couldn't make sense of it. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over again. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have been so blind? What did I do wrong? But no matter how many times I asked, I never got an answer. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't about me. This wasn't about what I did or didn't do. This was about her choices, her actions, her betrayal. And no amount of self-blame or second-guessing could change that. After days of soul-searching, I finally made a decision. I couldn't stay. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I wanted to believe that we could work through this, that we could rebuild what we had, that we could come out stronger on the other side. But the truth was, I didn't trust her anymore. And without trust, there was no foundation to build on. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I told her it was over. It wasn't easy. There were tears, arguments, moments of doubt, but in the end, I knew it was the right choice because I deserved better, and so did our kids. This experience taught me something I'll never forget. Love isn't enough. It's not enough to love someone. It's not enough to build a life together. What matters is trust, communication, respect, and when those things are broken, it's almost impossible to put them back together. I also learned the importance of self-worth. For so long, I had put Ophelia's needs above my own, sacrificing pieces of myself to make her happy. But in the end, it wasn't enough. Because you can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't build a relationship on a foundation of lies. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's this. Relationships are hard. They require work, patience, and a willingness to be vulnerable. But they also require trust, communication, and mutual respect. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Talk about it. Address it. Because the longer you let things fester, the harder they are to fix. And most importantly, know your worth. You deserve to be with someone who respects you, values you, and loves you for who you are. Don't settle for anything less. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe to Marriage Mysteries for more raw, unfiltered stories about love, trust, and the challenges that test even the strongest relationships. And remember, no matter how dark things may seem, there's always hope for a brighter tomorrow. Until next time, take care of your heart and your relationship.